He called me dead weight. I was standing outside the kitchen holding a basket of laundry. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but the window was open, and his voice carried straight through. He was on the phone with Melissa, his wife, pacing back and forth on the back patio like he always did when he needed space. I don't even know what they were talking about at first, but then I heard it. He said, "She's a burden, Mel. I know she's my mom, but I feel like I'm dragging around dead weight." I stood there frozen, basket clutched tight against my chest, my breath held hostage. Dead weight. He was talking about me, his mother, the woman who raised him alone, fed him with money I didn't have, stayed awake every night when he had asthma attacks, and never once, not once complained when he grew up, and barely looked back. And now in my own home, or at least the home I thought was still mine, I was dead weight. Let me know where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this story speaks to you, share your thoughts below. Don't skip, because what happens at the end will surprise you more than the betrayal itself. I didn't drop the laundry. I didn't cry. Not then. I backed away slowly, quietly, until I reached my bedroom door, closed it, locked it, and I just stood there staring at the mirror across from my bed. I was 62, widowed before I even turned 30. I had built my life around one person, and that one person just reduced me to an inconvenience. That night I didn't speak at dinner. They didn't notice. Melissa was scrolling through her phone, and Jordan, my son, was busy responding to work emails between bites of his steak. I had made the steak. I had gone to the butcher and asked for the best cut, even though the prices were high again. I made his favorite mushroom gravy like I'd done since he was 12. And he never looked at me once. I remember thinking, maybe it would have hurt less if he'd just hit me, if he'd yelled, or broken something. But the worst part was how normal it felt for him. Like that level of coldness had become natural, expected. And I had let it happen. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling and thought about every version of him I'd loved over the years. His chubby cheeks as a toddler, the way he used to sing off-key in the car, how he used to cry when he scraped his knee and whisper, "Don't tell Dad." Just you? There was no Dad anymore. There hadn't been for decades. It had always been just me. When I turned 40, Jordan surprised me with breakfast in bed, scrambled eggs and burnt toast, and a scribbled card that said, "Best mom alive." When I turned 60, I got a Facebook notification from him. No call, no card, dead weight. The next morning I moved slower. I stopped wiping down the kitchen counters like I usually did. I didn't rush to do their laundry. I sat at the dining table long after they'd gone, just staring out the window. It wasn't rage I felt. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was something deeper. Something that settled in my stomach like cold metal. I started remembering things differently. Like how Melissa had convinced Jordan I didn't need my own bathroom anymore. "She barely uses the tub," she said. "Let's remodel it into a walk-in closet." And Jordan nodded. Or how they'd suddenly forgotten to include me in the new homeowner's insurance paperwork, even though the house was originally bought under my name. How they insisted I relax more and leave the heavy decisions to them. It hadn't just started. I just hadn't wanted to see it. By Friday, I had gone quiet. I nodded when spoken to, answered when asked, but nothing more. And that's when I realized something strange. They liked it better that way. Melissa smiled more when I stayed out of the living room. Jordan didn't check in when I missed lunch. They liked me invisible, but I wasn't. Not yet. In the days that followed, I started taking walks alone, even in the rain. I went to the local library and pulled out old files I hadn't touched in years. I called an old friend, Claire, who used to work in real estate law. I asked her one question: is my name still on the house title? There was a pause. Then she said, "Let me check." And that was the moment everything shifted, because deep down I think I already knew the answer, and so did they. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't dead weight, not by a long shot. I raised him with nothing but love. That's the first thing I remember saying to myself when Claire called me back the next morning. I was standing in the garden pretending to check the tomatoes. The phone buzzed in my coat pocket and I felt my heart jump. I answered on the second ring, quiet, trying not to let the screen door creak open behind me. Claire didn't waste time. "Your name's still on the deed, Elsie, 100%. Joint ownership, but primary holder is you." I didn't breathe for a full 5 seconds. Then I whispered, "Thank you." And I meant it more than I'd meant anything in a long time. After that call, I sat in the shed for nearly an hour, just sitting, letting the weight of those words sink in. My name was still on the house. That house they thought they'd taken from me. That house I bought with my own money, brick by brick, penny by penny. I thought back to the day we moved in. Jordan was only 6. It was just the two of us with one mattress, a foldable table, and a toaster I got on clearance at Canadian Tire. The living room had no curtains. The windows were bare and open, and the carpet smelled faintly of old dog. But it was ours, and Jordan had danced across the floor yelling, "We have a house! Mom, we have a house!" Back then, I was still working overnight shifts at the hospital. I'd come home just in time to make his school lunch. PB&J, a peeled orange, a $1 coin taped to a sticky note that read, "In case of emergency or chocolate cravings." That boy was my whole world. I didn't go on dates. I didn't take vacations. When my friends booked cruises or weekend getaways, I stayed behind and made up excuses. It wasn't resentment. It was just love. Quiet, daily love. I taught him to ride a bike in the alley behind our building. I stayed up during his fevers and read Harry Potter chapters out loud until he fell asleep. I worked extra hours to afford his soccer cleats and braces. I sold my engagement ring to pay for his first year of college. I told myself it was all worth it. And it was. Until it wasn't. Because now, years later, he couldn't even look me in the eye. Now he was calling me a burden. Now he wanted me out of the picture. That memory stayed with me all week. It followed me into every room like a ghost. I kept remembering the little things: his first heartbreak when he was 17, how he came home sobbing because Melissa had dumped him back then, and I held him in the laundry room while he cried. I made grilled cheese and told him she'd come back. She did. Years later, they got married in a small vineyard in Niagara. I sat front row smiling until my cheeks ached, even though Melissa's mother barely spoke to me. Even though they said, "We'll handle the guest list," and I was allowed to invite exactly 4 people. I smiled through all of it. I gave up my master bedroom when they moved in during the pandemic, said it made more sense for them to have the ensuite since Melissa had back issues. I never got that room back. They slowly rearranged everything furniture finances power. It was like boiling a frog in warm water. You don't notice until it's too late. But now I knew something they didn't. I still held the keys, not just legally, but emotionally. They thought they'd outgrown me, that I was just a quiet old woman tucked into a corner of their busy lives. But they forgot I was the one who built those lives. So I started keeping notes. Nothing aggressive, just quiet details. Every time they use the house as leverage in conversation, "We're covering so many of the bills now, Mom." Every time they hinted I should find a smaller place with more elderly-friendly features. Every time they talked over me at dinner or rolled their eyes when I asked questions about the mortgage. I wrote it all down. There's a strange power in remembering, in watching, in noticing what people say when they think you've stopped listening. And in that stillness, I started remembering myself again. I used to want to travel. I used to love painting. I used to dream of a little house by the sea, somewhere warm, with a breeze that smelled like rosemary and oranges. But those dreams had been packed away, like the box of art supplies under my bed, like the passport I hadn't used in 26 years. Jordan used to ask, "Why didn't you ever remarry?" And I'd smile and say I had you. He thought it was flattery, but really it was a confession. I had him. I gave everything to him. I left nothing for myself. Until now. That Friday night, I opened a bottle of wine from the pantry, one I'd been saving for a special occasion. I poured a glass and sat on the front porch under the stars, and I made a promise. Not revenge, not anger, but clarity, closure, and eventually freedom. Because loving someone doesn't mean letting them erase you. Because being a mother doesn't mean being disposable. Because no matter how late it is in life, you can always take your name back. They started making me small. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part that still lingers how gradual it was. Like a leak in the ceiling you don't notice until the whole corner caves in. It wasn't cruel in the beginning, just subtle. A suggestion here, a shift there. After Jordan and Melissa moved in, it was supposed to be temporary. Their condo was being renovated, they said. 6 months tops. It'll be fun, Melissa said. Like family camp, but with wine and Netflix. I believed her. I wanted to. At first, I loved the idea of filling the house again, hearing footsteps upstairs, the smell of fresh coffee in the morning, someone asking, "Did you see the news today?" It reminded me of when Jordan was in high school, chaotic, noisy, alive, but slowly my corners began to shrink. It started with the TV. One night I came home from the grocery store and found my armchair moved out of the living room, just gone. No explanation. I found it tucked awkwardly in the back of the laundry room. When I asked, Melissa said, "Oh, it didn't really fit with the new flow of the space." Jordan added, "You still have your chair upstairs, right?" I stood there holding a bag of apples, nodding like that made sense. It didn't. Then came the kitchen. Melissa took over the pantry, reorganized it, labeled everything in pastel cursive, and moved all my spices into a single drawer. I found my turmeric wedged between vanilla extract and cupcake liners. When I tried to cook, she hovered behind me. "Are you sure you want to use butter for that? Jordan's watching his cholesterol." "I've been making this for 30 years, I said. She blinked. "Oh, I just read this great article on plant-based swaps. I started making less, eating in my room more, pretending I wasn't hungry." Next came the bathroom remodel. I still don't know how it happened. One day I had a tub and the next it was a shoe rack. Melissa stood in the hallway beaming. "Now I finally have space for my boots." I wanted to scream, but I just smiled. Because that's what I'd learned to do, shrink myself to fit their comfort. They didn't ask me to, not out loud, but they made it very clear that my presence was inconvenient. Jordan didn't step in. He never raised his voice. But he also never defended me. He acted like everything was normal, like I was being sensitive or just not used to sharing the space. Sharing. That word made me want to laugh. This was my house. I built it with calloused hands and secondhand furniture. I painted the walls, planted the garden, sealed the windows myself, and now I was being managed like a tenant overstaying her welcome. But the moment that stuck the one that etched itself into my bones happened on a Wednesday morning. I had made banana bread, Jordan's favorite. It was cooling on the counter, still warm, the kitchen filled with that thick, sweet scent that always reminded me of snow days and cartoons. Melissa walked in, looked at it, and said, "Oh, you still bake?" I looked up. "I do." She glanced at the clock. "It's just that with your energy levels and everything, I thought you'd rather rest." Then she smiled. That smile, it wasn't kind. It was surgical. I nodded. Well, I guess I had one more loaf in me. She didn't even taste it. Later that night, I found the rest of the bread in the compost bin. Whole, untouched. Buried under eggshells and kale stems. That's when I stopped trying. Not out of surrender, out of strategy. I stopped offering help with groceries, stopped folding their laundry when they left it in the dryer, stopped texting Jordan updates about the mail or the bills or the neighbor's dog that always got loose. I withdrew, not bitterly, not angrily, quietly. I started taking long walks every morning, bought a little notebook from the drugstore, and started journaling in the park by the lake. No one asked where I went. No one noticed. I became a ghost in my own home, and they seemed more at peace that way. Jordan spent most of his time glued to his laptop. Conference call he'd mumble when I tried to talk. Melissa filled the silence with home renovation shows and yoga live streams. Sometimes I'd hear them whispering behind doors, laughing, making plans. I never asked what about. I already knew. I was no longer part of the conversation. I was furniture, background noise, a fading photograph in a dusty hallway. But here's the thing, when people forget you're there, they also forget to hide. They speak freely. They show their real faces. And if you're quiet long enough, you learn everything you need to know. So I stayed small, smaller than ever before. But I was watching, and I was remembering. And soon, I'd start acting. I pretended not to notice. That was my shield, my armor, my disguise. They thought I was tired, lonely, fading. But I was watching, and I saw everything. It began with the mail. Little things. A notice from the bank that Jordan accidentally opened, then quietly tucked into his briefcase. A second envelope from the insurance company with my name printed first, not his. I said nothing. I started a folder. Then it was the credit cards. One afternoon while Melissa was out, I went looking for my missing scarf, the blue one with the stitched trim I kept draped over the coat rack. I opened the hallway closet and a folder tumbled out. Receipts, statements, credit balances, my name, my account. But none of the purchases were mine. A $200 charge from a home design store, 2 spa visits, a payment to an online furniture boutique, and my signature, forged, sloppy, lazy. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel rage. I just stood there holding that folder, realizing something quietly horrifying. They weren't just pushing me out. They were using me. Systematically, strategically, like a resource. They didn't see me as a person anymore. I was leverage, an asset, a stepping stone. I went back to my room, closed the door, and added a new section to my notebook, financial manipulations. That night at dinner, Melissa was radiant. She talked about how they were thinking of opening up the kitchen and possibly flipping the house in a few years. Jordan nodded, mouthful of grilled chicken I'd marinated. I smiled. "And whose name is still on the deed again?" She froze. Jordan looked up slowly. "I added gently, just curious. Haven't thought about it in years." Melissa chuckled nervously. "Of course, Mom. It's just technicalities. We're a family. I nodded. Of course we are. And that was the moment I knew for sure they thought I was stupid. They mistook my silence for surrender. But silence is often where strategy grows. In the weeks that followed, I kept pretending I didn't hear Melissa on the phone whispering, "She's not going to be here forever. Just be patient." Pretending I didn't see the boxes she kept in the garage labeled for a future move. Pretending I didn't notice Jordan deleting emails off the shared laptop before I walked in the room. But I did. I noticed everything. I watched Melissa accidentally throw out my medication refills twice. I watched them swap the locks on the upstairs bathroom. I watched as Jordan slowly took over the home utilities saying, "It's easier this way, Mom. We've got the online banking set up, but they never once showed me the passwords. They made it look like care, wrapped the betrayal in politeness. But what they were really saying was, stay out of the way. Your chapter is over." So I began rewriting the ending. One morning, I drove to the small branch of our original bank, the same one I opened my first savings account in. I sat across from a woman named Danielle who had a warm voice and too much mascara, and I said I'd like to review all the joint activity on my accounts. She frowned, clicking keys, then her eyes widened slightly. "Do you recognize these charges?" I did not, and I said so. Next, I went to City Hall. I requested a certified copy of the property deed. The clerk looked up and said, "It's still in your name, ma'am." Primary owner, want an extra copy? Yes. I did. I bought a second notebook. Started organizing everything. Legal documents, financial records, dates, conversations, screen captures. Everything I would need not to fight them, but to leave them behind cleanly, legally, unforgettably. And all the while, I played the part. I asked Melissa for her gluten-free banana bread recipe. I complimented the new guest towels she bought. I let Jordan explain how online bill pay worked, nodding like I'd never paid a mortgage in my life. I let them believe I was going gently. But inside, I was building a second life. One they wouldn't see until I was already gone. I started searching online late at night. Not for apartments, no. That's what they wanted me to do. I searched for the places I dreamed about in my 20s but never reached. Islands, coastal villages, places where no one knew my name and no one called me Mom like it was an obligation. And one night I found it. A small town in Greece. Sun-soaked. Quiet. A villa simple, elegant, surrounded by olive trees available for long-term rent. And I whispered out loud to no one, "That's mine." They kept making plans for a future without me. They didn't know I was already gone. They had counted me out, written me off. But I was counting the days, and I wasn't afraid anymore. Because the moment you stop waiting for someone to save you is the moment you start saving yourself. They didn't know I still had my name on everything. That was the key. That one truth, small, buried, forgotten, was the anchor I needed. They thought I'd signed it all away years ago. That I'd given up control when Jordan started managing the bills and Melissa started taking over home projects. They thought I was too trusting, too tired, too grateful to ask questions. But I never took my name off the deed. It was Claire who warned me back when Jordan first asked to be added. He was fresh out of university, full of ambition, talking about generational wealth and streamlining property. He said, "It'll just make things easier, Mom, in case anything ever happens to you." Claire, ever the realist, pulled me aside one day and said, "Don't take your name off the deed, Elsie, not even if they beg you with flowers and promises. Joint is fine. Primary is better. Keep it. Trust me." So I did, quietly, almost guiltily, like I was committing some secret act of rebellion. Back then, I never imagined it would matter. Now it meant everything. It was the last tether I had to my own life. I sat at the kitchen table one morning while Melissa hummed across the hall, reorganizing linen shelves that didn't need organizing. I sipped tea. The papers were already signed. Not the kind of papers they knew about, no. These were private, reviewed by Claire's former firm, quietly notarized, strategically dated. I had just sold the house, not listed, not for sale, sold, to a private buyer who paid in full, a woman from Nova Scotia who wanted a property closer to her grandkids and didn't mind a 6-month transition period. She wouldn't move in until summer. That gave me enough time to plan my exit clean, quiet, complete. I didn't tell them. Instead, I watched, listened. Melissa spent every morning browsing countertop swatches. Jordan talked about a bonus he hadn't earned yet. They spoke about next year's expansion, how they'd renovate the backyard, build a deck, maybe even a hot tub. They had no idea the foundation beneath them was already gone. And the most poetic part, they had made me feel like an unwanted guest in my own home. But legally, they were the guests. And soon they'd be former ones. I remember the day I got the wire confirmation. I was in my room folding towels, Melissa's towels. Technically, though, I doubt she ever noticed. My phone buzzed. I opened the banking app, and there it was, $927,000. I stared at the screen until my hands stopped shaking. Then I opened a second tab and booked a flight to Greece. One way. Departing in 4 weeks. There's something strange about knowing your escape is real. You move differently, slower, calmer, more deliberate. I started saying yes to things again. Yes to Melissa's gluten-free casserole. Yes to Jordan's lectures about retirement planning. Yes to helping pack up the guest suite, the one that used to be mine so they could turn it into a home gym. Yes, yes, yes. Let them believe I was going quietly. Let them believe I was shrinking. The truth was, I was shedding. One night I stood outside under the maple tree Jordan planted in 8th grade. It had grown tall, crooked, beautiful, just like him. I looked up at the branches and remembered his 13-year-old voice saying, "One day this will be the biggest tree on the street." He wasn't wrong. It was the only thing they hadn't tried to cut back. Funny how even a tree can stand taller than a person if you let it. I thought I might feel guilty, that as the plan fell into place, regret would creep in, whisper things like, "What kind of mother does this?" But none of that came. Only peace. Peace and a memory, one that bubbled up when I least expected it. Jordan was 10. He'd failed a spelling quiz and came home crushed. He'd hidden the test in his backpack, but I found it. When I asked why he didn't tell me, he said, "Because if I don't say it out loud, it's not real." I think about that now, about how they never asked me directly for the deed, never questioned whether I might still have power, because if they didn't say it out loud, maybe they thought it wouldn't matter. But silence is not surrender. Some of us just plan better with our mouths shut. A week before the flight, I started packing. Slowly, stealthily. I donated clothes I hadn't worn in years, gave away dishes, boxed up old photo albums, and left them neatly labeled in the garage. When Melissa found one of the boxes, she asked, "What's all this for, just clearing some space?" I said, "Downsizing, like you suggested." She smiled. "Good for you, Elsie." Elsie. Not Mom. Not Mama like Jordan used to say when he needed something. Just a name. Like I was a neighbor or a passing guest. That night, I sat on the porch with a mug of tea and watched the lights in the kitchen flicker behind the curtains. They were laughing. Probably about something I wouldn't understand. Probably not about me at all. And I realized I didn't mind. Because they didn't know. They didn't know the house was sold. They didn't know I had nearly $1 million in a private account. They didn't know I'd already signed a year-long lease on a villa overlooking the sea. They didn't know who I really was anymore. And I had no plans to remind them. Because what they saw now was a woman folding towels and simmering soup. But what I saw, a free woman, with a ticket in her purse, and nothing left to lose. The truth began to leak. It started with a voicemail I wasn't meant to hear. Melissa was in the shower. Jordan had left his phone on the kitchen counter face down, vibrating twice before the sound kicked in. I don't usually eavesdrop, I don't need to, but this one played on speaker. Maybe he didn't realize. Maybe the Bluetooth connected by accident. But I stood still by the sink holding a mug I hadn't yet filled as a woman's voice filled the air. Jordan, this is Nicole from Mercer Realty. Just confirming the buyer's legal rep requested a final signature from the primary homeowner. We'll need that before we close. Can you have Elsie contact us directly? Thanks. Nicole, Mercer Realty. Final signature. Buyer's legal rep. And suddenly the world tilted a little. They knew. Or at least, they were starting to. That afternoon, I saw it in Melissa's eyes. She was folding laundry mine for once and trying not to look at me. She asked too casually, "Hey, remember when you said you still had your name on the house?" "That's still true, right?" I nodded. "Oh, yes. It's in the paperwork." She paused, then laughed nervously. "I mean, if anything ever happened, you know. Emergencies or legal stuff, we'd just want to know where everything stands." "I'm sure you would," I said. Then I smiled. "Don't worry. Everything's handled." Handled. That word seemed to make her nervous. Later that night, I saw them whispering on the back patio. Melissa's arms were folded. Jordan paced. He shook his head once forcefully. She looked back through the glass door straight at me, and I knew. The mask was slipping. They'd been caught off guard. They thought I was dim. They forgot I once balanced a full-time job, a mortgage, and a child with severe asthma alone. I raised a whole person. They couldn't even manage a secret. The next morning, Jordan came into my room without knocking. He hadn't done that since he was a teenager, when he used to cry after nightmares and ask if he could sleep beside me. "Mom," he said, trying to sound casual, "we've been looking at some options. You know, long-term care retirement setups. Just in case. Some of them are in really nice neighborhoods." I looked up from my book. "Is that what you two were discussing last night?" He blinked. "What?" "On the patio, with your arms waving around. Looked like a long-term care conversation to me." He laughed. Too loud, too forced, just trying to help Mom. "You're late," I said, turning the page. He stared at me. Late for what? But I didn't answer. I just kept reading. 3 days later, a courier arrived with a manila envelope. Melissa grabbed it off the porch and hurried into the den. She didn't know I'd already been in contact with Mercer Realty, didn't know I'd sent the buyer all required documents weeks ago, didn't know I'd already wired a portion of the proceeds into a new account in my name, just my name with no joint access. But she would know. Soon. I waited until the tension began to rot the air, until Jordan's answers got shorter, until Melissa stopped humming around the house like she always did when she felt superior. The house felt cold, restless, like a stage before the curtain drops. Then I laid my own trap. A quiet Sunday morning. I made cinnamon rolls, fresh coffee. I even placed little cloth napkins on the table, the ones they got as a wedding gift but never used. They came down still half asleep. Melissa sniffed the air. Wow. What's the occasion I poured coffee, sat across from them, and smiled. I thought we should talk. Melissa stiffened. Jordan looked down at his plate. I slid a folder across the table. Nothing fancy, just a cheap plastic file with 3 sheets inside. The signed sale contract, the title transfer, and the closing date. Jordan opened it. His face drained. Melissa leaned in, her voice sharp. What is this? I looked at her calmly. This is me letting you know that the house is sold. Jordan's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Finally, he found it. Sold. Yes? Months ago. You can't do that, Melissa snapped. That's illegal. No, dear, I said softly. What you've been doing with my accounts, that's illegal. This is ownership. Legally documented, signed, and finalized. Jordan pushed the chair back, standing abruptly. You didn't even tell us. I didn't owe you that, I said, my voice steady. You moved into my home, made decisions without me, talked about me like I was furniture. You thought I was gone already. Melissa was shaking her head. You're going to ruin everything. Do you know how much we've invested here? I nodded. Roughly $300 in fraudulent charges. Don't worry, I've already spoken with the bank. Jordan ran a hand through his hair. Mom, this is crazy. We're family. No, Jordan, I said. We were. Now we're just people who happen to share blood. Silence. Melissa stood up. So what, you're just going to leave? I am. Where, Jordan asked. Where are you even going? I smiled again. Somewhere sunny. Somewhere far. Somewhere that doesn't call me a burden. He opened his mouth again, but I raised my hand. I don't want to fight. This isn't revenge. It's reality. I gave you my time, my money, my life, and all I asked was respect. Melissa muttered, unbelievable. No, Melissa, I said. What's unbelievable is how long I let it go on. They didn't eat the cinnamon rolls. I did. Every last bite. In silence. It was the best breakfast I'd had in years. I sat them down at the kitchen table. There was no yelling, no chaos, no slamming of doors or wild accusations. It wasn't that kind of confrontation. It was colder, sharper, a truth so clean it cut. I waited until the morning light came through the windows just right, casting that soft gold across the hardwood floors, the kind of light that makes even old bruises look warm. I set the table with care, not out of kindness, but formality, like a meeting. Jordan and Melissa walked in wearing their usual masks, him in half-distracted business mode, her with that social smile she wore when she wanted to seem innocent. Is something wrong? Jordan asked. Sit, I said. He hesitated, then pulled out a chair. Melissa followed, glancing at me like I might start screaming. But I didn't. I'd screamed enough inside my head over the past year to last a lifetime. I need to tell you something, I began. They both waited. I slid another folder across the table. Not documents this time, but a series of printed screenshots, bank charges, credit card statements, photos of the forged receipts, dates, times. Jordan picked it up and paled. Melissa didn't even reach for it. These are from my accounts, I said. On your devices, in your names, without my consent. Jordan opened his mouth. No, I cut in. Not yet. I pointed to the next sheet, a notarized affidavit from my lawyer, a letter I'd had typed and filed with the bank, all confirming the investigation had begun. Melissa shifted. This is absurd. I already submitted the paperwork, I said. This is not a threat. It's a fact. Jordan tried to laugh. You're turning this into something it's not. Then explain the $3,900 withdrawal at the same time I was at my doctor's appointment, I said. He fell quiet. I continued. Explain why you rerouted the utility bills through your own company and started charging me service fees. Melissa looked away. Jordan's hands curled into fists on the table. I wasn't done. I slid the final document across my will. Updated. Legally signed. No names on it but mine. Your access to my estate, I said, is gone. Melissa's voice cracked. You're disinheriting your own son. No, I said calmly. I'm preserving what's mine. What I earned. What I built. The money I saved from working overnight shifts while raising him alone. The mortgage I paid with tips and overtime. The equity you tried to erase while smiling in my face. Jordan's voice shook. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't even think about me, I replied. That's worse. He stared at me. For the first time in years, he really looked at me not like a background figure, not like a chore, but like a person. A woman. And for a brief second, I saw the little boy inside him again. I needed help, he whispered. And I was helping, I said, until you started treating me like a burden instead of a mother. Melissa stood up. So what? This is it. You just disappear and leave us in the dust. I met her eyes. No, I'm giving you the truth, whether you want it or not. You're abandoning us, she snapped. I'm freeing myself. Jordan stood now, 2 hands shaking slightly. Where will you even go? I pulled a printed photo from the folder. A villa, stone walls, blue shutters, olive trees. A view of the Aegean Sea. Here, I said, where people don't call me dead weight. He looked at the photo, then at me. You were never supposed to hear that. But I did, I said softly. And once you hear something like that, you can't unhear it. Melissa muttered something under her breath. I want to be clear, I added. I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself. And if you're struggling, you'll figure it out. You're adults. You've made that abundantly clear. There was a silence then, heavy, unblinking. Jordan sat back down, like the weight finally landed on him. When are you leaving end of next week? I said. My flight is booked. My room is paid. The car is sold. The house belongs to someone else now. You've been planning this the whole time, he said, almost like an accusation. Yes, I said, because I knew if I told you too early, you'd try to stop me. Not out of love, out of control. Melissa grabbed her phone. You'll regret this. No, I said. I regret waiting this long. She walked out first. Loud steps, slamming door. Jordan stayed. Just sat there, shoulders hunched. I never wanted it to come to this, he said quietly. I know, I said. That's what makes it worse. He wiped his face. Will you ever come back? I thought about that. About all the nights I lay in bed listening to them whisper. About the way my favorite chair disappeared. About the banana bread in the compost. No, I said. He nodded. Didn't argue. He understood now. He had mistaken silence for weakness, politeness for passivity, motherhood for martyrdom. But I was done being erased in my own story. I stood up. There's leftover soup in the fridge. You can have it. He looked up at me, eyes glassy. And for once he didn't call me Mom. He just said, take care. I nodded. Then I walked away. And I didn't look back. The house is no longer yours. I didn't say it with malice. I didn't even say it in person. I left a letter on the hallway table the day I moved out. Cream-colored stationery, my handwriting clear, calm, final. It began with a single line. As of noon today, this house no longer belongs to anyone in this family. I had hired movers 2 days prior. Private, discreet. I'd already packed my essentials into 3 labeled suitcases and 5 donated boxes. They came while Jordan was at the office and Melissa was at her yoga class. By the time they returned, I was already gone. No big scene. No long goodbye. Just the echo of empty drawers and a note in neat cursive. The buyer would take possession in 6 weeks, but I wasn't sticking around to see it. The transition would be handled by the lawyers and the escrow company. They could read the paperwork like I had. Alone. In silence. I had booked a room at a boutique inn 2 towns over. Nothing fancy, just a place with clean sheets and a balcony overlooking pine trees. I spent that first night with a warm mug of mint tea and a blanket wrapped around my legs, listening to the wind whistle outside. It felt like a funeral and a birth all at once. The next morning, I opened my phone and saw 5 missed calls from Jordan. 3 voicemails, 2 from unknown numbers, 1 short email titled, "Where are you?" I didn't respond. The power of silence. They had taught it to me. Now I was returning the favor. Later that day, Claire texted me. "Just spoke to Melissa. She's furious. Said she can't believe you'd sabotage their future." "You okay?" I replied, with a photo of my breakfast fresh olives, feta, toasted bread, and wrote, "Better than I've been in decades." Claire just replied, "Good." Meanwhile, the house unraveled without me. I knew from the neighbor Shirley, sweet woman, nosy as a crow, always up for a phone chat. She said they were panicking. They thought they owned the place outright, she said. Walked around like it was theirs. You should have seen Melissa's face when the new owners showed up with the inspector. I could imagine it. The tight jaw, the fake smile, the question in her voice, "Are you sure?" There must be a mistake, but there was no mistake. Everything was filed, everything was signed, everything was mine until it wasn't. And that's what they never understood. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishment. It was about truth. They built their lives on the illusion that I would always be there, that I'd absorb the insult, the dismissal, the quiet theft of my time, space, and dignity. But the moment I remembered my name was still on the deed was the moment I started rebuilding my spine. In the days that followed, I started shedding the old skin. I canceled every joint account, filed identity protection, redirected all mail to my new address in Thessaloniki, and quietly transferred the remaining balance after the house sale and legal fees into a personal account tied to an international debit card. When Jordan emailed again, this time longer, more desperate, I read it slowly, line by line. "I know we made mistakes. We just didn't realize how you were feeling. We never thought you'd do something so final. Melissa is struggling. I'm overwhelmed. Everything's changing. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who would have cried, apologized, come back and cooked dinner like none of it ever happened, the one who said yes, of course, even when her heart said no. This hurts. But that woman was gone. She'd left quietly in the back of a moving van. She'd signed her name for the last time on the dotted line of a house, once filled with warmth, now filled with entitlement. So I replied only once. Subject, RE. Can we talk, body? You had the house. You had my time. You had my trust. Now you have the consequences. No greeting, no signature, no closure, just the truth. I never heard back. A few weeks later, Shirley messaged me again. They're gone, packed up overnight. Heard they're staying with Melissa's sister. Poor thing. Never thought you had it in you. I didn't reply. I was on a ferry watching the sun scatter across the water like shattered gold. There was music playing faintly in the background, some local tune about olives, wine, and lost time. I leaned on the railing, breathed in the salted wind, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel heavy. I didn't feel like dead weight. I felt like myself, light, free, and full of quiet power. Let them have their bitterness. Let them whisper about what I did. Because at the end of the day, I didn't take what wasn't mine. I simply reclaimed what always was. I moved out with just one suitcase, not because I had nothing, because I finally understood what I didn't need. No china sets, no dusty albums, no drawers full of winter scarves I hadn't worn in 10 years. I left behind the fake leather recliner Jordan bought on discount, the hand-me-down linens Melissa labeled with color-coded stickers during her last home inventory. They can keep all of it, because all that clutter was just a monument to my silence. I packed exactly what I wanted: a pair of walking shoes, 3 dresses, my pearl earrings, a small framed photo of Jordan, age 4, missing 2 front teeth and grinning with peanut butter on his cheek, and my passport, which I hadn't held in over 2 decades, but now cradled like it was my ticket to oxygen. I remember the morning I left like it was a movie playing in slow motion. The sky was overcast, the clouds low and heavy with late spring moisture. I didn't leave a key, didn't write another note. I just zipped my suitcase, rolled it to the door, and took one final look back at the house that used to be mine. Not the version they remodeled, but the original. The one with handprints on the walls from when Jordan ran in with muddy fingers. The kitchen where I burned my first pie. The hallway where I danced alone with a glass of wine after paying off the mortgage. I said goodbye without words, because the only person I needed to hear it wasn't listening anymore. The cab came right on time. The driver helped with my bags, asked where I was headed. Toronto Pearson, I said. International Terminal. He asked where I was flying. Greece, I replied. He whistled. Big change. Yeah, I said. Long overdue. The airport was a blur of motion, rolling suitcases, announcements, families shouting and hugging and crying, and me moving through it all like a ghost who had finally remembered she was alive. When I stepped onto the plane, I didn't cry. When we took off, I didn't flinch. When the flight attendant offered me water and asked first time to Greece, I smiled and said, first time anywhere in a long, long while. I landed in Thessaloniki just after noon. The light was different there, golden like it carried stories. The air tasted like rosemary and distant wood smoke. Even the language I couldn't yet speak felt like a welcome. The villa was exactly as the photos promised. Simple, sun-washed, quiet. Stone floors that stayed cool even in the heat. A small terrace with chipped mosaic tiles and a vine-draped pergola. An old wooden table facing the sea. The landlord Lena greeted me with honey-soaked pastries and a thick hug. You stay as long as you like, she said. Time moves slow here. We like it that way. And that's what I wanted. Time that was mine. Not dictated by Jordan's conference calls or Melissa's meal plans. Not organized around family obligations or what makes the most sense right now. Just mine. The first night I ate dinner barefoot on the terrace. Goat cheese. Tomatoes so sweet they almost didn't taste real. A glass of chilled white wine. I watched the sky turn from soft peach to deep indigo, and I felt it the peace I hadn't even realized I was starving for. There were no chores, no passive-aggressive sighs, no conversations I had to tiptoe through. There was silence, but this time, it was kind. I slept 9 hours straight, woke up without a knot in my chest, and when I opened the shutters and saw the sea again, I whispered, "This is mine." Over the next few days, I settled into a rhythm. Mornings spent walking the local market, picking up fruit and cheese from vendors who smiled without asking questions. Afternoons on the beach with a paperback. Evenings watching the stars emerge while cicadas whispered in the olive trees. I started to write again. Not in the old notebooks, but a new journal. A leather-bound one I bought in a small shop tucked between a cafe and a bookstore. I filled its first page with one line, "I am not too late," because that's what I'd feared for so long, that I'd missed the window, that I'd waited too long to be anything other than what I'd been. But the truth was, freedom doesn't expire. It waits, quietly, patiently, until you're ready to reach for it. I made friends with a woman named Irini who ran a flower stall. She taught me the Greek word for lavender, lavanda. I repeated it until it felt like my own. We sat together one afternoon by the harbor and she asked, "You have family back in Canada?" I hesitated, then said I had a son. She didn't press, just nodded. Sometimes that's all a person needs to say. Some afternoons I caught myself wondering what Jordan was doing, if he missed me, if he realized what he'd lost. But I didn't wonder for long, because every time I felt that ache of old loyalty rising, I would open the window, breathe in the sea air, and remember he was the one who let go. I just stopped chasing. A villa, a vineyard, and peace. That's what I bought myself, not with money, but with the courage to finally walk away. The villa sat on the edge of a sleepy village, where the hills folded into the sea like a soft curtain. From my terrace, I could see vineyards stretching in lazy rows, each vine heavy with fruit that tasted like sunlight. Most days I sat under the pergola with a linen scarf over my shoulders, sipping coffee and watching the world move without urgency. Peace. Not the kind you pretend to feel when the house is quiet, but full of tension. The kind that settles in your bones and makes you realize how loud your life used to be. I rented the place for a full year. Lena gave me a generous rate. "You're like my Canadian aunt," she said with a wink. "You can stay forever." And I might. I spent my mornings walking. No schedule, no errands, no one needing a ride or a favor or a sacrifice. I stopped to pick figs, to take photos of chipped blue doors, to pet stray cats who acted like they owned the island. Sometimes I got lost on purpose. And for the first time in over 40 years, I didn't feel guilty about wasting time. I signed up for a cooking class, not because I wanted to cook for anyone. I'd done that long enough, but because I wanted to learn how to make dolmades like the ones Lena brought over every Sunday. I spoke with a clumsy accent, and the teacher, Maria, corrected me with laughter in her eyes. I started painting again. Nothing special. Just watercolors, sunrises, the curve of the sea, the shadow of vines against stone. And in the late afternoons, I would sit with a glass of local wine and write in my journal. It surprised me how much I had to say. I didn't write about Jordan often. I didn't need to. What I had to say about him wasn't new. It had already been said the moment I handed him the folder across the kitchen table. The rest, that belonged to me now. But I wrote about motherhood, about how easy it is to lose yourself in it, about how love, when it's quiet and consistent, becomes invisible, and how invisibility is dangerous when people start to forget you were ever more than a helper in the background. I wrote about rage, how I'd swallowed it for years and renamed it patience. How I'd convinced myself that being unappreciated was part of being strong. How dignity doesn't come from suffering. Silently, it comes from knowing when to walk away. And I wrote about power, the kind that comes back to you once you remember that your story doesn't end just because someone else stops reading. One morning, I got a postcard from Canada. It was from Louise, an old friend I hadn't seen since Jordan's wedding. She wrote, "Word got around. Some people are in shock. But me, I just smiled. You always were the quiet kind until the day you weren't. Proud of you." I kept that postcard in my journal. A few days later, I ran into Lena near the olive groves. She was holding a basket of lemons. "You look different," she said. I laughed. "Hopefully not sunburned." "No," she said. "Lighter, like someone took the bricks off your chest." I smiled. Someone did. Me. That night, I opened my laptop for the first time in weeks. The Wi-Fi at the villa was spotty, but it was enough to check one thing: my email. There were 2 new messages from Jordan. The first one was short. Subject, still trying. "I know I hurt you. Melissa's gone back to her sister's. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I just hope you're safe. Please write back." The second one was longer. Subject, "I miss you. I remember the way you used to laugh when I said silly things. I remember your banana bread. I know that's not enough, but I think about it every day now. You didn't deserve the way we treated you. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to become someone you'd be proud of again." I closed the laptop, not out of anger, not out of pain, just peace. I'd said everything I needed to say when I left. The silence that followed wasn't punishment, it was healing. But his words didn't sting anymore, because I wasn't waiting for them. That's what he didn't understand. Forgiveness doesn't always mean a return. Sometimes it's just letting go without looking back. I finished my wine. I stepped outside. The stars were out again, scattered like old secrets across the sky, and I whispered into the night, not for him to hear, just for me, "I'm proud of the woman who left. Because I didn't run. I didn't break. I simply remembered who I was before the world tried to shrink me, and once I remembered, I never let her go again." He sent an email. I didn't reply, not because I wanted to hurt him, not out of bitterness or spite, but because I had nothing left to say. When I first opened that message, I stared at it for a long time. It was late afternoon, the sky glowing pink beyond the shutters, the air thick with the scent of thyme from Lena's garden. A pot of stew bubbled gently on the stove, and a soft radio tune played in the background. And there it was, his name on the screen. Jordan. That name used to be everything to me. Just the sound of it could send me running in joy and panic, in love. Now it made my chest feel like an old piano string, not broken, just quiet. The subject line read, "Please, just tell me you're okay." Inside it was longer than the last one. "I've been sitting with everything you said. I can't lie, I was angry at first. I didn't understand how you could just leave. But now I see I never tried to understand you at all. I thought I was protecting you by making decisions, but I wasn't protecting, I was controlling. Melissa left, said she's done. Honestly, I don't blame her. I think we both used you in different ways. I don't know where to go from here, but I do know I was wrong. And I miss you. I miss you so much." I read it twice, then again, and for a second, just a second, I felt it. That old ache. That need to rush in and fix it like I used to when he scraped his knees or failed his spelling quizzes, but I didn't. I closed the laptop and walked outside to the stone steps behind the villa. I sat with a blanket over my legs and watched the sea turn from sapphire to silver. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. Because the truth was, I already knew he missed me, and I also knew he didn't know why. He missed the woman who showed up, the one who made it easy, the one who gave without asking. But that woman was gone, and the one who remained wouldn't go back. The next morning, I went to the bakery and bought a warm loaf of village bread. The baker, Andreas, always gave me the crusty corner piece for strong women, he'd say with a wink. That day I walked farther than usual, past the market, past the harbor, into the hills where wild flowers grew in defiant bursts. I sat by an old stone wall and ate the bread in silence. The sun pressed warm against my shoulders. A goat bleated somewhere nearby. It was nothing really, just a quiet moment, but it felt like the reward for every year I spent pretending not to be tired. Later, Irini met me at the harbor cafe. She was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and carrying a basket of oranges. "You look lighter," she said. I smiled. "I think I finally let go of the last brick." She didn't ask. She didn't need to. Instead, we drank coffee and watched the boats roll in. She told me about her niece's upcoming wedding and how she was making flower crowns for all the guests. "You should come," she said. I hesitated. I wouldn't know anyone. "You know me," she replied. And here, that's enough. That night I opened my journal again, wrote one line. "They will always need me more than I need to be needed." It wasn't meant as cruelty. It was a truth I had earned. Because for years, my identity was tied to service. Mother, helper, peacemaker, cook. But now I had peeled all those titles away, and what was left? Me, Elsie, a woman who could sit with her own silence and not flinch. Jordan sent one more message a week later. This time no apology, no plea. "If you ever decide to speak to me again, I'll be here. But I understand if you never do." And that was enough. Not closure, but acknowledgement. A recognition that he finally saw what I had been holding all along. The next few days blurred together in the best way. I swam in the cold sea and gasped when the waves hit my skin. I learned to say thank you in Greek without stumbling. I spent an entire afternoon painting lemons in watercolor, and they looked absolutely nothing like lemons, but I liked them anyway. No one asked me what I had achieved that day. No one measured my worth in tasks or chores. No one waited for dinner on the table. That was freedom. Not the dramatic kind that comes with slamming doors. The quiet kind that comes when you no longer explain your joy. I did write one letter, though. Not to Jordan. To myself. I folded it and tucked it in the back of my journal. "You did it. You said no without guilt. You walked away without permission. You let the silence carry your strength. You are not a burden. You are a woman who chose herself. At last. They got what they gave. That's how I see it now. It's not about karma or revenge or some poetic balancing of scales. It's simpler than that. The world gives you back what you offer to it eventually. And Jordan and Melissa, they offered me disregard, neglect, control disguised as concern, dismissal wrapped in politeness. They built a life where I was an afterthought. So when I removed myself from it, the whole thing buckled. I didn't know the full extent of the fallout until Shirley called me again. Her voice came through the WhatsApp line, a little fuzzy with the time zone delay. "Elsie," she said, her voice low, gossipy, a little too delighted. "I know you don't want updates, but you'll want this one." She was right. Apparently, after the sale finalized and the house legally changed hands, Jordan and Melissa had to be out in 30 days. The buyers, a retired couple from Nova Scotia, were firm but fair. They gave a written extension, but only a short one. No leeway. No negotiation. They packed up in a panic, Shirley said. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. He looked 10 years older. Tried to smile at me. It was sad. Where did they go? I asked, calmly sipping my tea. Melissa's sister's basement. Shirley replied, That big house with the ugly lilac shutters. You know the one. I nodded, even though she couldn't see. I know it. They're saying she's not speaking to him now. Blames him for the loss. She paused. You don't feel bad, do you? I thought about that. I really did. Once I would have. Once I would have cried over it. I would have packed care baskets, written long letters about how we're still family, tried to undo their own mess with my effort, but not anymore. No, I said. I don't feel bad. Because what they lost wasn't taken. It was never theirs. They built a life on sand, on entitlement, on the quiet assumption that I would always be there to smooth things over, hold the load, make it all work. And when I stepped away, they were left with the weight they'd handed off to me all those years. It was never sustainable. They just never thought the foundation would leave. I went for a long walk after that call. The light was slanting gold across the olive groves, and children were playing with sticks along the edge of the dirt path. A man on a bike passed me singing something low and rhythmic in Greek. And I realized I didn't want them to suffer. But I didn't want to fix them either. Their consequences were their own. Their silence, their small cruelties, their games. They got what they gave. Back at the villa, I cooked dinner for myself, a simple grilled fish with lemon and herbs. I set the table with a cloth lit a candle. Not because anyone was coming over, but because I wanted to sit down and feel like someone worth setting a table for. That night I wrote 3 words in my journal, Peace doesn't apologize. The next morning I walked down to the village cafe. Irini waved me in, saved my usual table. A young woman served me hot bread and honey and smiled like she'd known me forever. No one here asked about Jordan. No one knew what I used to carry. They only knew the woman I was now, and the woman I was now. She felt light, unburdened, not because life had suddenly become perfect, but because she had stopped asking for permission to be free. I checked my email once that week. Nothing from Jordan. Just one new message from the utility company back home confirming the account closures I'd requested. I smiled, deleted it. No more links, no more ties, no more reminders. They had tried to erase me with politeness. Now I had erased my connection with finality. And still I was not cruel. I was clear. 2 days later, I took the bus into Thessaloniki for a farmer's market. I bought a straw hat and fresh lavender. A boy played violin near the old church steps, and I gave him a few coins. He smiled, shy and grateful. And I thought, this is the life I built. Not with Jordan, not because of Melissa, but with every small moment I stopped sacrificing for someone who didn't see me. They got what they gave. Not because I made it so, but because I stopped making everything else. And in that space, something better grew. The final letter I never sent. I wrote it the week before my birthday. Not because I wanted to send it, I never intended to, but because I wanted to see what would come out if I stopped censoring myself. If I spoke freely without fear of guilt, consequence, or repair. I sat at the little writing desk by the window, the shutters half open, the breeze carrying the scent of citrus and dust. The villa was quiet. Only the ticking wall clock and the soft hum of a cicada outside kept me company. The letter began like this, Jordan. I'm not writing this for you. I'm writing this for the woman I used to be, the one who spent so many years needing your love, to feel like her life had meant something. It went on. There was a time when your laughter was enough to make me forget how hard it was. When your little hands wrapped around my fingers and you'd fall asleep beside me, I thought I'd done something right. I gave up everything I ever dreamed of because you became my dream. I don't regret loving you. I never will. But I do regret letting you think that love meant servitude, that motherhood meant silence, that my life was something you were entitled to inherit piece by piece until there was nothing left of me but dinner and financial assistance. I paused there. The pen hovered. I hadn't realized how much was still inside. I kept writing. I listened when you called me dead weight. I didn't interrupt. I didn't storm out, because by then I had already left you in my heart. The woman who raised you knew it was over. You chose to treat me as a problem, to manage, not a person to respect. And you made that choice more than once, in whispers, in glances, in what you didn't say every time I asked if everything was okay. I folded the letter halfway, then opened it again. Melissa was never the problem. She was a mirror. You treated me how she treated me, and you let her. So did I for too long. But I found something better than your permission. I found my self-worth. I remember crying then, not sobbing, just 2 clean tears sliding down like they'd waited decades for the exit. I didn't run away from you, Jordan. I walked toward myself. Finally. You won't hear from me again. Not out of punishment, but peace. I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. It means release. I signed it, simply Mom, and then I folded it, placed it in an envelope, wrote his name on the front, and slid it into the drawer of the desk between a lavender sachet and my passport. It's still there, and it will stay there, because closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a truth we keep to ourselves, a final word spoken in a room no one else is allowed into. Since then, I've celebrated another birthday. Irini threw me a small party in the village square. There was music, candles, and a lemon cake with my name written in Greek. Elsie, it said, just like they pronounce it here. People danced. I laughed. Someone even flirted with me, a retired French professor named Louis, who brings wine to the market every Thursday. I told him I wasn't looking for anything. He smiled and said, "Neither am I. But it's good to see you smile." I do smile more now, not because everything is perfect, but because I am mine. My legacy isn't a house I passed down. It's a story I reclaimed. Let them tell their version. Let Melissa call it betrayal. Let Jordan tell people I walked out. I know what really happened. I stayed until I was erased. And then I wrote myself back in. As I am now, a woman who doesn't ask for space, she takes it. A woman who doesn't need to be needed to know her worth. A woman who, after 40 years of giving, finally received the most important thing of all, herself. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever felt small in the space you built, if you've been called a burden by the very mouths you once fed, if you've stared at a window wondering if you're too late to live something more, let me say this clearly, you're not. I was 62 when I left. I was 63 when I unpacked. I was 64 when I danced again. You are not too old. You are not too far gone. And you are not a burden. You are a life. So go live it.